Muy buenas noches. Este es Tiempo de Mercadeo, Serie Internacional 2013. Yo soy Carlos Fernando Villa. En la ciudad de Columbus, en Ohio State University, hay una gran profesora de mercadeo que ha tenido grandes reconocimientos nacionales e internacionales, Melissa Fisher. Con ella vamos a hablar en la noche de hoy sobre diferenciación, sobre estrategias, sobre posicionamiento y sobre el manejo del mercadeo en realidad en el siglo XXI. Melissa, good evening and welcome to my program. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Such a
Honored to
marketing
be
person.
here.
Oh my goodness. Melissa, what's new on marketing? Anything new?
There are always new things going on. Really new, meaningfully new, it's much more rare. So a lot of social media and a lot of companies are doing some very interesting immediate ads. There was an ad during our Super Bowl when the lights went out. Oreo Cookie took advantage of that and did an immediate ad and put it out on social media. So that would have been unheard of.
$1 million, you know?
Yeah, well, there you go. You know, $1 million here, $1 million there. So that would have been unheard of even just a few years ago. So some techniques are new and some mediums are new, but when you get right down to it, the truly break frame newness is not all that new. Innovation, differentiation, strong positioning for businesses, those things are pretty consistent.
Marketing is the same, it has always been the same. So what could be said that is new is just new ways to do things.
New
But marketing is just about the same. I mean, it's not going to change.
And so in a lot of ways, the core fundamentals remain the same. What's your differentiation in the marketplace? How do you stack up against your competitors? What do your customers really care about? Not what you care about and what you want to sell them, but what do your customers really care about? And how do you position your business for growth and to serve those customers? Those things don't change. The way we go about it, the tactics that we can use, the tools that we have to use are better and faster. But the caution is that with so many tools and with so many marketing functions becoming available through online mediums and everything else to everyone, a lot of companies, I shouldn't say a lot, many companies forget those fundamentals, differentiation, positioning, targeting, and they jump to the tool but never think about the overall foundational strategy behind it. And that's a lot of times that leads to some less than stellar results, shall we say.
You have been so successful at creating new markets, or if we can put it that way, creating new demands. Adrian Silvowski wrote a book called Demand. Any way to do that? I mean, in your experience, how did you do it? How did you create new demand or new customers or new markets?
That's an interesting question. So, do you really create demand?
Oh, okay, well.
Or do you serve demand that was there but unfulfilled?
Which is that's the way it is.
Right. So and we talk about this both. I talk about this both with my clients and with my students. Right. So unless your name is Steve Jobs, and he's not around anymore.
Oh yeah, he's not around anymore. But he's gonna be around for a while.
Well, his work will be around.
He's gone,
it will live on, right?
Yeah.
So unless you're Steve Jobs or someone of that, there are only a few of those in the world. You can't come out with a product or a service that nobody recognizes that they need. And the reason that I would say Steve Jobs maybe was a little bit of an exception to that, when the iPad first came out, no one was completely sure why they should care about it. Looked like a big iPhone, costs a lot more, and a lot of people said, well, what do I need with this thing? He was enough of a visionary, and he could see that the market would develop around the iPad. Apps, all of the rest would come if it were out there. That happens once in a blue moon. And bear in mind, for everybody out there who thinks that they are the next Steve Jobs with the next iPad, consider the advertising budget that he had to put behind that. Consider the corporate resources that he had and the company had to allow the time for the market to develop and the need to become apparent. That's very unusual, and that won't happen for 99.9% of us. And therefore, the much better, much more efficient, much more effective way to go about it is to go out and understand the market, understand consumers' needs and desires and frustrations. They may not ask you for exactly what the product is. They may not tell you what the product is. But if you can hone in on a frustration that they have, they may not realize that you could develop a product to address that. That's your job.
Absolutely. You have to find out customer insights in order for you to come out with something new. Like I would say Lee Iacocca with Chrysler in the 80s or late 70s. He came out with the minivan.
Right.
And nobody thought about the minivan before Lee Iacocca. So that's a good question. He didn't create a demand for a minivan. He found out what families needed, and he
served
that. Yeah. And so many people have done that. Oh, not many people. Like you said, Steve Jobs. I don't know who else I could say. Melissa Fisher.
No.
So how come you have created new demand? When you worked for Mattel, what did you do?
I was a brand manager, so
Yeah.
I worked on the Disney brand,
Yes.
the Nickelodeon brand, and the Harry Potter brand.
And you got new customers, which is called new demand.
Got new customers, got new demand, but we were serving, kind of a matter of semantics, we were serving demand. There were kids who loved Rugrats and Harry Potter and all of the Disney characters, and we merely filled that desire for toys within them. Much different situation. A little bit more recently, I worked for a lawn and garden tool company. Very basic. And when I first went there, they said, we're going to innovate a leaf rake. And I thought, ooh, that's about as exciting as innovating a rock. But we did. We went out and we talked to consumers, and we found out that they have a frustration with raking wet leaves. It's hard. Nobody likes raking leaves, but they rake the dry leaves, but then when you have the wet, clumpy leaves under the tree or behind the garage, that's a frustration, and normal leaf rakes didn't address that. No one said, hey, I want a leaf rake that can rake wet leaves behind my garage. But by talking about that with consumers, they brought up that insight, that frustration, and we were able to address that then with a new product. And in that way, created demand for something that had not been there before.
You know what? We're going to have to go to a commercial break, and we'll be right back, okay? Vamos entonces a una tanda de comerciales y ya estamos de nuevo con Melissa Fisher y con ustedes. Ya volvemos. Melissa, we're back. You mentioned a word that it's become a very common word nowadays: innovation. What's that?
Well, Carlos, it's funny because to a lot of people, innovation is anything I put a new SKU number on. Stop keeping unit, right? Mm-hmm. So if I take your microphone and I make the part at the top white instead of black, some people would call that an innovation, okay?
You know, Ted David said all of his life that innovation is one thing and improvement is another thing. So, but there has to be a difference.
Right. So I think of it as a continuum from incremental change a color, make something smooth that was rough or whatever, to really break frame innovation, where you're coming out with something that is unlike anything anyone's ever seen.
Didn't exist before.
Didn't exist before in any form. And obviously not very many of our products are at either end of this spectrum. Most of our products fall somewhere in the middle, more or less innovative. But definitely the more successful, much more risky, but more successful innovations are up here at that closer to the end of never been done before, don't have anything like this on the market, no close competitors, and then that leads to happy situations where you can charge more of a premium price, you own the market for a period of time, a little bit more of a powerful position versus your competition, versus if you just go out and copy someone else, or if you just change a color, that's easy for the competition to react quickly to.
Let me try to have an example here. A cellular phone, a mobile phone with a camera.
Yes.
Is that an innovation or is that an improvement?
Well, I would say that the first one was an innovation, right? Someone, and I can remember everyone had conversations about, why on earth would you put a camera in a phone?
Yeah, right.
Why? We have cameras.
Or internet on the phone.
Yes, yes, right? So the first one is an innovation to a degree. It's closer to this end of something that's not been done before. We had cameras and we had phones, so you could say that in that sense, it wasn't truly at the other complete end of the spectrum.
Yeah, the telephone was made for you to talk. The camera was made for you to take pictures.
Take pictures, and who would, why would you necessarily want those two things together? But look now, certainly all these years later, I can't even think that fast as to how many exactly, but all those years later, now you have people who are doing entirely new activities because someone put a camera in a phone.
Could we say then that that's a consolidation of something? But a good example of innovation may be a GPS.
The GPS would be definitely more of a, closer to that never been done before. The product that you put on your eyelashes to make your eyelashes grow longer and thicker, that would be something that, women have worn mascara for many years. They want longer, thicker eyelashes, but for the first time you're actually able to grow your eyelashes longer and thicker. So that, kind of like GPS, something that's really very, very different. GPS addressed the same need as maps and other types of things, but in a much different, much more efficient way. And so, yeah, much closer to that very break frame end of the innovation spectrum.
Let me jump into something else. How important is positioning in marketing now? You know, I'm asking because I'm with Jack Trout, and I want you to...
Well, it's funny because, given what we just talked about in the beginning, there are a lot of companies out there who spend little to no time on positioning, and many times, and I see this when I work with clients, sometimes I meet people who they're not getting the kind of business that they want. They're not attracting the kind of customer that they want.
Because they don't know what business they are in.
Because they haven't spent that upfront time to lay a solid foundation. It's like building a house without putting in a foundation.
Yeah.
It's going to be all shaky and wobbly. And that's kind of the way some businesses approach it. And they don't...
I wouldn't say some, I would say many.
Many? Okay, that your words, not mine. I don't want to get in trouble with the entire business community. But yeah, definitely, if you don't know who you are, just as importantly, who are you not? Who are you not going to serve? Because I think it was Abe Lincoln said, and I'm paraphrasing here, you can't be all things to all people.
Right.
Right? The same is true for business.
In your experience, if we were to open a business or to have a new business, how should we start doing, positioning, segmenting the market?
Right.
What's a startup?
For a startup, it's really important to lay that foundation. And we marketing people are guilty of throwing around a lot of big words and everything.
Absolutely, yeah.
But definitely, lay a foundation, and it doesn't have to be an extremely time-consuming or an extremely expensive proposition, but positioning is very simply who is it that you are and who is it that you're not. So what is the personality of your business? And you can go online and find a lot of formats for a positioning statement, but it's usually company name is the generic.
Yes.
For, and then who is it that you're going to serve? What target customer are you going to serve? So think about those things. What business are you in, generically? GPS is a travel, guiding, driving type of a service or a need. What target customer are you going to serve? Are they going to be very rich people? People without much money and many means? Are they going to be athletes, or are they going to be senior citizens? By starting to lay that foundation, and all of that goes into your positioning, competitive analysis, differentiation, all of those decisions that you make. And in the beginning, it's not about the fancy logo or the fancy ad or the fancy, the really cute tagline or whatever. This is boring Microsoft Word documents, you know, black letters on white paper. It's boring, but it's that upfront strategic thinking that then informs everything you do from that point on. And the really sexy ad or the fabulous looking logo or website or whatever, all of that should grow naturally out of your business strategy. And if you don't have that business strategy, it's like building the house without a foundation.
Melissa, we're going to go to another commercial break and we'll be right back.
Right.
Okay? Vamos entonces a otra tanda de comerciales y ya volvemos. Melissa, is there a difference between branding and positioning, or branding is a way, you know, a way of positioning a brand?
I think about it a little bit differently. So the positioning is that boring Microsoft Word document that has the strategy. The branding is sort of the execution then against that. The branding becomes then the bringing that positioning to life.
A result or a consequence.
A consequence. So then the branding then is the logo and the tagline, whatever messaging you create then to sort of bring that business strategy and all that boring text to life and sort of create the full personality for your brand or your company. So if a positioning is a brand's personality, the first step is who are you going to be? And then you think about, well, how am I going to present myself to the marketplace? That's the branding. So how am I going to do my hair? How am I going to do my makeup, my wardrobe,
Don't look
whatever?
at me about the hair.
How am I going to actually execute against that positioning, and what is the face that I'm going to put out to the marketplace? And that's the branding.
Talking about positioning and branding, we have to talk about differentiation. How are going to be, I mean, how can you differentiate in a world where, like I read some days ago, the offer, the worldwide offer is about 28 times the possible demand. Mm-hmm. How can you differentiate in a world that is, you know, full of products, full of services, when you have more than you need? How can you differentiate?
That's an interesting question, and a lot of people struggle. I think we all struggle with that. A couple of things. Number one, most people assume that the way to differentiate is on price. And a lot of people go to that immediately, and they try and be the lowest cost provider. That's not necessarily wrong, but that is probably the shortest, most inefficient differentiation strategy that you can come up with. Because
not wrong, but risky.
Very, very risky, because you may be the low price leader today, but boy, next week, next month, there's going to be somebody who figures out how to do it just a little bit cheaper.
Like we say, as long as anybody has a pencil and a piece of paper, they can become, you know, lower than you.
Right, right. Yes, and it's one of those live by the sword, die by the sword, right? Mm-hmm. So if you live by the sword, and you're going to die by the sword. If low price is all you've got to offer, someone's going to come in and undercut you. So price is important. Price can be a definite differentiator, but it's probably the shortest lived and most risky of the differentiators. So
probably if you want to differentiate yourself by price, you have to have a lot of money.
Obviously, money helps, but you know, for a lot of our retailers here in the U.S., many people try and beat, price. For us, Walmart has come in and they're beating almost everybody. And when you try and think about beating them on price, that's going to be a very daunting task. So price is probably the first thing most people think of, and in fact, it probably should be your last resort, never resort, in terms of actually differentiating that way. The way to differentiate is some of the stuff that we talked about before, a better way to differentiate. Go out and talk to consumers, get their insights. What can you give them that is either an improvement on an existing product or a different way of addressing the same need? So you talked about GPS. GPS was a better way of getting us from point A to point B when we don't know where we're going, and we have this map in the car that we're trying to finagle while driving, right? And GPS was a better, more accurate way of doing that. That's a differentiation strategy that's much stronger than simply price. The other thing that you have to do, and a lot of people miss this, is you have to differentiate from yourself. So one of my favorite bosses at one point in time used to say, if you don't obsolete yourself, someone else will do it for you, and it'll be much more painful.
No question about it.
And a lot of companies, especially if they achieve some success, they sort of get complacent and they think, well, we're number one, we own this market. That just paints a great big target on your back to say, if you, and I've even had these conversations with people that I've worked with before. Well, if we introduce that product, it'll take away sales from this other product that we have. That is potentially true, but if you don't take away these sales, you leave the door open to all of your competitors to do a better job or a more updated job or whatever. So why not obsolete yourself and keep those customers within your company and your brand?
Melissa, you know what? We're running out of time tonight, but then we'll continue next week because we got a lot of things to talk about. Okay?
I look forward to it.
All right, thank you. Se nos acabó el tiempo por la noche de hoy, o sea que la próxima semana continuaremos con Melissa Fischer hablando sobre todos estos temas que son espectaculares en el mercadeo. Muchas gracias y una feliz noche.
Talk sometimes about the long tail, right? The idea of this.
That was Chris Anderson, if I recall correctly.
Chris Anderson's, the idea of the long tail. So you're no longer limited to the X number of books that Barnes & Noble can fit on their shelf in a store. And now with e-readers and online, you can have a book that's about some very, very, very specific, obscure subject that only 50 people in the whole wide world are interested in. If they're willing to cover, if by selling to those 50 people, you can cover the cost of producing that, and it's much, much cheaper if you don't have to print it and ship it and all of that, and make a little bit of a profit, all of a sudden there's a business there that there hadn't been before. So yes, the entire world is becoming hyper-segmented, and we often talk about marketing to one. Instead of marketing to a large group or a large segment of customers, how can we market to each separate person and almost at the extreme give them a personalized experience or a personalized product? We probably aren't there yet for most of our product categories, but for a number of product categories and for a number of businesses, they can add customized portions to their product or service. So if 80% of it is standard and the last 20%, you get to decide on the color of your shoes, or you get to decide on the exact configuration of maybe the silverware set that you buy or whatever. Those kinds of hyper-segmentation, that's a move that's been happening and is going to continue.
You mentioned something that reminded me of the customer again, because many people ask, how often should I contact or get in touch with the customer? How often should I have, let's say, focus groups? How often should I pop questions to them? What would you say about it?
Well, of course, as a marketer, I'm going to say you should always constantly be in contact
Absolutely,
with your
web.
customer, right? But on a realistic basis, for a lot of small and medium-sized businesses, you should be gathering constantly customer feedback. So, asking customers to rate your service, asking them to do a simple 3 to 5 question survey.
Using the telephone, for example.
Using the telephone or even the internet, give them, and maybe give them a little bit of an incentive to do so. A discount on their next order if they fill out the survey, or the chance to win an iPad or whatever. So that level of communication should be ongoing. Then the next level up in terms of focus groups or a big survey that you might do about products and innovations and new businesses, that kind of varies with industry and with type of company, but you should never make a major business decision. You should never undertake a major project or a major new direction without including the customer, the voice of the customer. And people say, oh, research is so expensive. It can be very expensive, and in some cases there is no substitute for that, but in an awful lot of cases you can get pretty creative, and you can talk with different consumer groups in very efficient ways. So neither money nor time are an excuse for not being in touch with your customer on an ongoing basis.
One more time, we have to go to a commercial break.
All right.
Vamos a una tanda de comerciales y ya estamos de nuevo con ustedes. Let's take the crystal ball. Try to to see what's going to happen. What do you think is going to happen with advertising, with this amount of media that we have? Because so many people are saying, hey, traditional marketing is dead, traditional marketing is dying, traditional advertising is dead, traditional advertising is dying. What do you say about it?
Well, my initial reaction to that is there are still a lot of people lining up, at least here, to pay $3 million, $4 million for a 30-second Super Bowl ad.
In the Super Bowl. Just one time.
Just one time, 1 30-second, and that's not even the production. That's just the time. So I think the reports of the demise of traditional advertising might be a bit premature. However, I do agree that now that there are so many different options, so many different ways of communicating with your customer, it's not as easy as it used to be. It used to be sort of a formula, right? We do some TV, we do some radio, we do some print, we're done. Now you have to consider social media and other forms of online and events, and then there's always sort of that backlash. There's the opportunity as more people are doing everything online. There's the way to stand out for some people is to do something that's very traditional and very create an event or a stunt or whatever. So I think there's going to be a continuation of more and more mediums. But the other thing, and I talk about this with both my clients and my students, a lot of businesses think that the extent of their advertising or their promotional efforts, we're gonna have a Facebook page and a Twitter account, and we're gonna be on social media. That's great, and you definitely want, depending on the business, you definitely want your customers to be talking about your business to their peers and their friends, because after all, they probably know other people that would be good customers for you. But at some level, you need to help create that story, that branding personality. You need to help give them an idea of what to talk about, because frankly, they have interesting lives. They're not thinking about your brand or your product or your company 23 hours a day like you are. So it helps. There needs to be some way of initiating that conversation. What is it that they're going to say about your brand? What is it, you need to put out there a story and a personality that is authentic, and that when someone sees it, they believe it, and that call your bluff and say no, you know, because they'll very quickly know if you're lying or if you're faking it. But put out there a story that is very authentic and compelling, and then the social media is sort of the tool that allows it to spread like wildfire. But the spark has to come from the brand in defining who it is that they are.
You remind me of someone who says that we marketers are becoming more like a journalist. We're telling stories, we're writing down a lot of experience to make a story, to attract people, to maintain people. You think it is happening?
I agree. And definitely stories are more compelling.
Storytellers.
There have been a lot of studies that we as human beings just relate better to stories. But again, you have to have some thinking, some strategy behind. Of the 20 stories I could tell you, which ones are going to resonate, which ones are going to feel authentic, and which ones are going to sort of be true to the brand strategy. And again, that foundational thinking. Otherwise, there may be stories out there that just have no, it's a cute story, but it doesn't help, you know, address the product, or doesn't really compel anybody to consider the buying or buying into the product. So you really do need to have sort of there's that word again, that strategic perspective, right? Because the storytelling and all of that are tactics. Again, you need that thinking up front to be sure that the stories are all fitting into the overall strategy.
Yeah, and we have to be careful, because you remember that book written by Seth Godin, All Marketers Are Liars. Melissa, we're going to go to another commercial break and we'll be right back, okay? Vamos a otra tanda de comerciales y ya estamos de nuevo con ustedes para la parte final de este programa con Melissa Fisher. One more thing, in your experience, have you seen, well, so many people are saying that the most important media today is the customer, the comments, word of mouth. Is that right?
The peer-to-peer marketing.
Right.
So what other customers are saying to their friends.
Yes.
Definitely very important. What peer-to-peer marketing or word-of-mouth advertising, very, very important. But again, you need to make sure that you've provided them with a story.
With the information, yeah, with the story.
And with the information that you would like to have communicated. And again, you can't go out and blatantly lie, because people will call you on it immediately. But you want to make sure that you sort of put that out there. And I've seen statistics, there have been a number of studies, and I can believe that it'll probably become even more solidified, that we as human beings trust our peers, trust word of mouth recommendations and reviews, even more so than other forms of communication, even more so than a magazine article or whatever. Because we feel like people like us have sort of looked at this product or service and have made an evaluation. And that's great. And the other component of that is, if somebody's like me, they're probably going to have the same concerns or problems or desires that I do. So mass advertising, again, has its place, but it doesn't hone in on the particular type of person. So a young person will value a review from another young person because they have similar economic situations or similar life stages or whatever, versus a review from just anybody. You're not really sure whether they're looking for the same things in that product or service as you are. And that's another reason that the peer-to-peer is so much more powerful.
And what about free press? Because that's another, thing that people are really believing in.
Again, I'll quote Chris Anderson again.
Yes.
Free is hardly ever free, right? So we talk a lot about free press or public relations or
yes.
whatever. Especially for business owners, it's important to remember that to do that successfully and effectively, especially over time, there's probably still a professional who's helping with that. So a public relations professional, a journalist, or someone who's helping craft that story. Again, we get back to the story.
Right.
It's not just any random information or any random story. It's information and a story crafted in such a way to put the message and the important points that the company is trying to convey.
Back to differentiation, Melissa. So many marketers are saying that service to customer makes a difference. I would like to know what you think about it. Service to customer.
Well, obviously, Carlos, people aren't going to get very far if they don't serve their customers. So on one level, customer service is maybe the core for a lot of businesses. But then the next question is, how much customer service? So I have been in many meetings, and I have friends who complain about a lack of customer service. Maybe there's something wrong with their computer, and they're frustrated that they have trouble. They can't just pick up the phone and call somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night and talk to them about the problem with their computer. And I sympathize, and I believe me, I have been there. But the question always comes back, are you willing to pay more for your computer to get that level of customer service? So customer service is a requisite to do business, and it's very important. But then as business people, we have to decide how much service, and are our customers willing to pay us for that level of service? If I offered you $20 off of your computer, but told you that you have to go online and you have to try and solve the problem yourself, and you can only call a customer service representative after you've done that, and only from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, but I'm going to give you $20 or $50 off of the computer, you might well take that deal. And if enough consumers are willing to take that deal, that starts to help us decide how much customer service and of what level of quality are we prepared to offer.
If I asked for a definition of service, what would it be?
To a lot of people, it means give me whatever I want, right?
Yeah, that's what it means to most people.
To a lot of customers, it's whatever I want. And there are, hopefully in the rare instances, customers.
Because everybody knows that old saying that says, customer is always right. And you and I, and everybody knows that customer is not always right.
Well, and the other thing that businesses have to remember, and hopefully this is the rare instance, some customers know that we have that attitude, and they'll use it to their advantage and milk it to try and get things that they know very good and well they don't deserve. So the question is, okay, how much customer service, and how are you going to provide that in a way that is fair to everyone? So yes, the customer is always right, especially if you, in your heart of hearts, know that either your company has fallen short or they have a very good legitimate complaint. But you do have to be careful. In some instances, there are opportunities, again, for differentiation based on customer service. So some people will pay more for the computer just to have that lifeline, to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody at any time of the day or night. And other people are willing to go for it more on their own. And there you have two different differentiation by price point, but also by customer service, and probably some other features. And that's why we don't just have one maker of computers or one maker of shoes, that those differentiation on customer service and many other attributes allow for many companies to thrive.
Melissa, I got so many things to talk about with you, but we're running out of time. So I would like to ask you for an advice to Colombian marketers now. With your experience, what you have done with your students, with the companies you have been working for, what could be an advice for the Colombian marketers?
I think my final thoughts would be centered around, it's an ever-changing world. Don't be fearful of that. Go with the flow, embrace change, embrace all of the new ideas. But don't forget that foundation. Don't forget those principles that we talked about in the very beginning: positioning, differentiation, innovation, targeting consumers, talking to consumers. Those things, the methods by which we accomplish those things may change over time, but those principles are going to be long-term.
Okay, Melissa, it is too sad that we're running out of time. I was having such a good time talking with you, and I appreciate what you've done. I hope you'll be able to come to Colombia, visit us, and help all the marketers over there.
I would love that.
Oh,
Let's get out
I'll
the
try to do
calendars.
it. Okay.
We'll mark that in.
All right, I'll try. I'll try to do it. Ya ven ustedes la clase de persona, la clase de mercadóloga que es Melissa Fisher, por eso es una de las más reconocidas, no solamente en el mundo de la universitario, sino en el mundo de la consultoría. Como quiera que la experiencia que ha tenido es espectacular. No nos resta sino agradecerles a ustedes que nos hayan acompañado e invitarlos a que sigan pendientes de nuestra serie internacional. Muchas gracias y una feliz noche. New demand. Adrian Silvowski wrote a book called Demand. Any way to do that? I mean, in your experience, how did you do it? How did you create new demand or new customers or new markets?
That's an interesting question. So, do you really create demand?
Oh, okay, well.
Or do you serve demand that was there but unfulfilled?
Which is I mean, that's the way it is.
Right. And we talk about this both, I talk about this both with my clients and with my students, right? So unless your name is Steve Jobs, and he's not around anymore.
Oh yeah, he's not around anymore. But he's gonna be around for a while.
Well, his work will be
yeah,
around.
He's gone,
it will live on, right?
Yeah.
So unless you're Steve Jobs or someone of that, you know, there are only a few of those in the world, you can't come out with a product or a service that nobody recognizes that they need. And the reason that I would say Steve Jobs maybe was a little bit of an exception to that, when the iPad first came out, no one was completely sure why they should care about
Muy buenas noches. Este es Tiempo de Mercadeo, Serie Internacional 2013. Yo soy Carlos Fernando Villa. En la ciudad de Columbus, en Ohio State University, hay una gran profesora de mercadeo que ha tenido grandes reconocimientos nacionales e internacionales, Melissa Fisher. Con ella vamos a hablar en la noche de hoy sobre diferenciación, sobre estrategias, sobre posicionamiento y sobre el manejo del mercadeo en realidad en el siglo XXI. Melissa, good evening and welcome to my program. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Such a
Honored to
marketing
be
person.
here.
Oh my goodness. Melissa, what's new on marketing? Anything new?
There are always new things going on. Real about it. Looked like a big iPhone, costs a lot more, and a lot of people said, well, what do I need with this thing? He was enough of a visionary, and he could see that the market would develop around the iPad. Apps, all of the rest would come if it were out there. That happens once in a blue moon. And bear in mind, for everybody out there who thinks that they are the next Steve Jobs with the next iPad, consider the advertising budget that he had to put behind that. Consider the corporate resources that he had and the company had to allow the time for the market to develop and the need to become apparent. That's very unusual, and that won't happen for 99.9% of us. And therefore, the much better, much more efficient, much more effective way to go about it is to go out and understand the market, understand consumers' needs and desires and frustrations. They may not ask you for exactly what the product is. They may not tell you what the product is. But if you can hone really new, meaningfully new, it's much more rare. So a lot of social media and a lot of companies are doing some very interesting immediate ads. There was an ad during our Super Bowl when the lights went out. Oreo Cookie took advantage of that and did an immediate ad and put it out on social media. So that would have been unheard
Another $3
of.
million, you know?
Yeah, well, there you go. You know, $1 million here, $1 million there. So that would have been unheard of even just a few years ago. So some techniques are new and some mediums are new, but when you get right down to it, the truly break frame newness is not all that new. Innovation, differentiation, strong positioning for businesses, those things are pretty consistent.
Marketing is the same, it has always been the same. So what could be said that is new is just new ways to do things.
New
But marketing
tactics.
is just about the same. I mean, it's not going to change.
And so in a lot of ways, the core fundamentals remain the same. What's your differentiation in the marketplace? How do you stack up against your competitors? What do your customers really care about? Not what you care about and what you want to sell them, but what do your customers really care about? And how do you position your business for growth and to serve those customers? Those things don't change. The way we go about it,
Yeah.
the tactics that we can use, the tools that we have to use are better and faster. But the caution is that with so many tools and with so many marketing functions becoming available through online mediums and everything else to everyone, a lot of companies, I shouldn't say a lot, many companies forget those fundamentals, differentiation, positioning,
Yes.
targeting, and they jump to the tool but never think about the overall foundational strategy behind it. And that's, a lot of times that leads to some less than stellar results, shall we say.
You have been so successful at creating new markets, or if we can put it that way, creating